is Alpha Bravo, live in Springline adaptations, reporting interactation lines that have positional locations. Echo Zulu 1, Fox Charlie, Charlie line communications sending direct signals. Copy to modify interactions lines, Papa uniform. Now we come in position location directions. Directing signal is knowing exactly how to identify your systems and the walls through our tangos and our tango in lines of information of intel. Everything is line settings. We got in this before in location of electronic, but now we have to start how to identify through echo. We have to identify how to come into sonar. So it's all about, I got ringing ears. What does that mean? It's ringing in my right, it's ringing in my left. Now they're both ringing. So if you don't pay attention to what's going on, it just gets louder and louder and louder. So it repeats its pattern. Let me say that again. It repeats its pattern. Okay. So I'm going to show you basically how to identify the system through the echoes and where it's coming from through sonar. It's a direct location to your planets. Each planet has a line screen. It's a direct signal locations, but you've got to get modification to see yourself in line settings to formulate and simulate yourself in the simulation that you are, not what you live in. Okay, living in cycles is in your core, yes, but the position location to your projection is inside position of you. You are space, you are time. So that puts position locations, I am in no space and I am in no time. So it's direct and redirect that humanity has to come into and track locations. Now, get in that position lines of high center interference. How do we direct signal locations? How do we understand how to set position locations to our tone settings? How do we break up rhythm? How do we break up programs? How do we go into code signals? How do we go into code breaking? How do we go into modification? How do we go in channel communications? It's all direct how we break it down. We have to change the rhythm patterns. If we don't understand the program itself that comes to us. We are our own processing in position of data processing of intel that comes to us through programs. We're programmers. We have to understand the programming system that comes to us through energy, vibration, frequencies, and harmonics. You're getting schematics. And if you're not understanding the schematics it's given to you, you have to understand how to use it through your binary. Okay, through your transistors, resistors, and your light switches. That gets you in position to how to use that in information lines. Now, you guys are on your test when it comes to your cerebral. Now you're in position of your hardware. Okay, get into the home beacon lights, coming into and out of the lines of the awareness, coming into the atmospheres, okay, of its remembering to its relays, coming into that retract location system and out lines of realignment, coming in lines of directions or divisions of dimension. Okay, knowing exactly I have to go beyond mass now. If we get a pi correlation setting of track interference lines of pi communication and fusion, directing signals in calculation, right? We've gone through this before, but it's important you understand. Getting lines that communicates lines is muscle memory that you already know and track communication to its position. So that's calculation, directing signals, waiting on position, now it's in traction. Okay? I have to communicate with this, right, through its own system of its own programmer. This is a programmer. So what is coming to you, what is coming to its conscious location of its awareness is programming. Okay, so if it doesn't understand you through processing, okay, you have to understand how to formulate and simulate in that position so it becomes yours in set calculations inside the setting. Okay. So it's understanding you through your binaries and understand how to use it through your placebo, your cortex, your SIM cortex, your SIM card, which is your memory card that your phone has. You have that too, okay? Which is to connect to your setting in track locations at all levels, the signify line calculation setting in the sigma line set location setting in line communication to its stigma, line correlates and setting a track lines communication to its formation, puts all communication lines to your power cell. Okay? All right, having a power cell is your energy line. It's the volume, velocity, and vacuum. It's the track location system which puts you into the lines of your jevities. Shortjevity, longevity, line communication setting. Now, a power cell splits lines of communication lines of triangulation lines of split lines. It's a splicer, core track location lines, no bypass. It's line communication setting in positional levels, okay? So the actual power cell is your life force, okay? Life force has a continuous force. It has line signal, line communicate to its system. Working with 7 Sets lines that correlate and set to your bodies of water. Now, the position lines of the plasma screen directs the signals, modification, use simulation graphs, communication graph, correlations graph, communication graphs, simulation, communication, interference graphs. Directing lines of signal is knowing exactly how to use the communication of the light force that's given to you in interactions. So it's about you understanding the processing system of your programming, okay, of programmers that you are. Programs are coming to you. You have to get in a way to break it down in position and all settings, right? Break it down in all ways and forms, right? Zero correlation, zero traction. Okay, very simple, right? So once you understand your binary and you understand the placebo, how it works through the cortex, and you understand how to use your endorphins, and then you come into series A and B. That's core tract interference line direct signals, which is processing communication lines of C pods, tract communication lines, high chord, sarcomere location, and neuralinks. High lines of communication line setting. You are your own programmers. You have to understand how to get in your own binary, how to transit and resist, how to get into a efficacy of performance, and try to understand everything that comes to you. Okay, so you put things in default enabled that process your position that's embedded inside your system. If it's embedded, now it's running its own program, overloading your system, overriding your system. Okay, so it's very important when things come to you through intel of anything, all lines of communication of information, you automatically change the binary. You reset position of its setting so it doesn't run the program by itself. Because if it runs its program by itself, it just expands inside of you. Okay? So, getting in position lines of track centers, getting lines of correlation setting and travels, point lines of graphs, center core system, travel communications, right? Sonar, directing signals from one center, sets correlation lines of two track location, right? Set location lines of nose and the mouth. Okay, so set core track lines of two settings and processing, right? Process lines, calculation lines, screen adaptation lines of service. So it sets position location of force recognition going into force recognition of time sequence through the ear. Correlates line, screen lines, adaptation to the process communications, stops and signals and track locations to its box frame. Okay, sets communication ground lines, data formation lines, screen adaptation lines of server location setting and travel communicate to its CPU location to its system. Travel point lines of graph, over cross lines, outlines the left line ear, sets rotation and cycle. That's all it does. Nothing else, nothing more, right? The central system comes in a higher lines to communicate to its system. Now, once it reaches patterns, it comes into a frame communication. Now, that directs signals into platforms that communication lines, screen adaptation lines as surface and traction. Directing lines of platforms, core track interference, 60,000 comes to two lines of measure and track locations. Scanning lines of communication lines of platforms 1, 2, 3, and 4 settings of travel. Direct calculus lines of 4, lines 6, lines 8, lines set location lines of travel. Directing calculus lines of platform A, B, C, and D, and track location setting opens all signals and modification. Okay, that's echo and that's sonar. And that's what goes on every second, every minute of your day. Okay? Setting communication lines direct signals. So you have XT1000 going into the right ear. You have XT1000s coming out of the left ear. You have the two track location lines of left over right, right over left. So once you realize this is your left ear and this is your right ear. Remember I told you the information location lines, screen adaptation lines of surface, where you can take the right hand and replace the left hand. Now this is my right hand, this is my left hand. Same with your ears. Okay? So your ears basically automatically change. Frequency changes, the chord changes, the echo zulu lines, directing lines of Charlie to taxi, the runways change. Everything changes location and frequency. Okay, bounds of communication ground centers. Process calculation lines of center in center line business location to XT1000 opens all channels of communication lines to its system through operation. Directing signals of platforms, sets core track interference. Setting lines of communication on the high core track center location setting. Center core system is center of operation setting. Okay? But it's always in 4 platforms, 5 line division locations. This is the H line channel, okay, which is your heart. Track location lines of ribbon, sight lines, high center interference, travel point lines of graph, center core system, and downshift cross line screen lines adaptations to your earth and track location. Okay? And that's what goes on through your echoes and your sonars. Okay? Now, how the planets come in is really fascinating because it has an audio repeat. It's like, and when you pick up that, and you get a confirmation back, it changes the audio rhythm. It breaks up the rhythm pattern in the psychosis location to a system of the psychological reset that changes the coloration patterns to its planet. So it reshifts the planet to another line communication through devolve that copy and paste its position location of travel that changes the transistors and resistors in set position to its calculation setting. Okay, to its planet surface. Okay, so the planets come in traction. Okay, let's bring in Pluto. Okay, Pluto comes in. Line signals, ground centers, the 3-line rotation surface and track locations, right? Directing lines, right line cycle, line communication, ground centers. In line position, the Earth line cycle. Direct signals back into the Earth line calculation setting, the right track location of the ear. Spectrum lines, core track interference, and line calculation to the eardrum. Directing lines of high core track and location lines through its system. Optical line screen adaptation to the eye cycles. Line communication lines and nose lines with the appearance line screen. Directing lines of 4 lines of panels. Track location lines and all lines of flux. Line communication of templates and tablets, front lobes, low lobes, line communication point lines of graph communication scrambler, directing line signals, modification lines, set location line condition inhibitors, setting core lines and neck lines, screen lines adaptation, process line calculation lines of solar graphs, communication lines of high location of detection. Okay, complicated stuff, right? All right, so once you understand once it has an auto repeat, it changed the signal, which position lines the planet to another direct signals through calculation. It processes over to the other side, right? So in that lines, the higher level of the goal line communication coming to the galaxy line screen line, which is the cosmos, directing signal lines in a 7-7 panel in line rotation cycles and regenerate communication setting in a 4-4-4 4-line communication setting to stargates and portals and communication lines of wormholes that change the communication lines of measure, that change the particle acceleration line screens, adaptation lines of surface of time capacitor, sets lines of track location. All right. This is what goes on through ring and ears. Very complicated stuff. All right, so once we understand the modified line screens, location of plasma line centers, the process calculation lines and simulation changes all graph communications, right? So let's go through 18 lines of cycles. Let's lines of 5 lines of measure, time sequence lines of 12 clocking system, set correlation lines into 15 lines of grounds, okay? Sets core lines at 1 lines of cycle, 18 lines of measure, 5 core center interference, 1 track locations, and 2 settings in processing, right? This is you in the center operation. In set position, right over left and ear lines of tractions, direct signals, right? Signal 5 core track and so 5 lines of measure, 8 lines of signal, 1 lines of system. The system lines the core to center adds a flywheel track location lines of 158 rotations and 8 lines and communication. Directing signals modification ground centers opens all signals. Comes into the line communication lines of flux that communicates in the panels, line connection setting of its bridging in rotation surface to a half pipe that tracks the core setting into the left ear, into the right ear, and travel in positional particle acceleration and time sequence. Okay, complicated stuff, but a lot of fun, right? So this is what goes on when you get ringing ears. Okay, it's all lines of communication to your planets. 12 line signals and line screen adaptation lines of setting and 0 gravity. It's core track location because the planets know exactly where you are in heat signatures. They look at you in line communications. So this is how the planet sees you in tractions. This is the planet. Okay, set lines of communication. This is how they see you in set position, right through a line communication window, right? So this is you waving back in set position, okay? Okay, and they're here in set position. And the top line signals. Monitoring system, all line communication setting. Intelligence lines have their own monitoring settings. Computer framing track location, okay? So if we understand the window frame, then we understand the graph frames, communications, triangulation line communication frames, directing signals modifications, right? Ground center locations, setting lines of calculation settings. All right, let's go through the profile view. Directing lines of client lines, high center interference, 45 split lines of communications, directing signals of 3 panels, 3 track location, right? Window screens, correlation settings, and high track location, okay? Setting communication lines of high center interference of 4/3, 3/6 in travel. Okay, directing lines of panels and 6 over lines of 1 and position lines of travel. Set line electrical line grids, electrical line walls, electrical lines of panels, and line communication setting position location of travel. Okay, core track provision, set lines calculation lines, size interference into moonbeams and track location of the system. Platitude line screens adaptation to processing, line screen adaptation of capsules and communication setting and track location. Okay, complicated stuff, but a lot of fun. This is what goes on this is what goes inside your ears. Remember, it's all film projector. It's all schematics. It's all primer. So it has set location lines, calculations. So the team is line signaling now. Once they get into line position, the mind's eye into 24 line track locations, their automatic ears turn into spectrum lines of schematics. Your primary circuits and your primates change all communication to planet service lines of track locations. Setting lines calculates lines of sonar, directing signal lines of panels, process calculation lines of grounds, powers, atmospheres, and highways in track location. Okay? Directing lines of tubing, one center, one surface, one track location, right? Tubing lines, torque fields, and line position. Okay? Process calculations like grounds, set lines of EMF, inline rotation cycles, and generation screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Okay? All right. So your ears are changing lines of spectrum now, line to line communication setting to intercom. Direct calculus lines to intelligence, narrow links, network system lines, calculating lines of intro screens, directing lines of high center interference, directing calculating modify in line condition setting, interline rotations, track to its communication line direct signal locations to its setting and position. Intron, okay, which is outtron. Now you have some location lines of high center location to its system. Intron, outtron, all right? That's where the team's coming into. Once you get into line communication, you understand how to use the formation lines of grounds, how to use the cybergenetics, the cyberkinetics, the cybernetics, high core track interference is cyberforce, cyber streams, cyber core track location setting, Android, symbolism, symbiotics, thinbots, robots, anything information location of transformer, okay? So in that adaptability in line screen adaptation system, your planets are changing rotation line cycles. It changes all communication and plasma generation screen lines. It communicates the high formation lines as a correlation setting of echo line screen adaptation to its surface. Process calculation line screen application to its system, right? Set position of 3 cycles. Okay, set position lines of 6 cycles in line communications. Okay, and direct signals, right? Modify the centers and travel. Point lines of graph, center communication, right? Direct signals, center communication. Direct signals, center communication. All right. Platform set lines of high center interference, inner lines of flux, center core system, and travel. Okay. Direct lines of Merkaba, tesseract, and tetrahedron, and higher line communication. Okay. Processing calculation lines of the ground centers, open signals into spectrum correlation setting and traction. Directing signals lines of flux and a 3-line communication lines of perimeter and line position. Process calculation lines, constant communication setting, and line rotation surface, inline setting in spectrum lights and travel and communication. Direct calculus modify line screen adaptations, process calculation lines over cross location of intelligence. Okay, complicated stuff, but a lot of fun. And again, this is all done through your ears. Everything that you come from here comes from here in setting and structure and design through primer. Getting direct signals in that line communication system. All intel is all formation lines of the eyes and position locations to setting through the ears and through the mouth. Process calculation lines come into the ventricle system of the heart. The heart retractor line screen adaptation process the location of line settings, has position location of metric meters, and scales of communication lines of balance in track locations. Directing lines of modification puts everything in all formation lines of ground communication, 16 lines of value, calculation lines of 5 signals in the line position, right? Process lines of 15 over traction. Yeah, let's get a direct signal. Okay, 15 lines of cycle, 6 over line, 6 over 2, and position of 5 over the lines of 1, 1's over 3 in track location, right? This is all from your ears. Planet line sequence is already in chronological order in 3 cycles, okay? Process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, process lines of 4, process lines of 5. Directing signal lines of 1 over 6 over line, set position lines of travel. Directing signals and modification of the ground centers. This is your right ear and travel communications. This is your left ear and travel communications, all right? This is the center core system of circulation, rotational line connections to your system and travel. Sets communication lines of barriers and lines of tractor beams and line position locations of levels, process lines of torque fields, line communication upswing, down cross line signals into optical screen lines at locations to octaves, that line screens adaptation to its magnetic force lines of computer operation intel and track location. Very complicated. And again, this is coming from your ears, from planets, all right? So echo lines, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface is higher levels of formation location and settings, right? Coming into the higher line communications of Tron, okay? Inner Tron and outer Tron. That's what the team's coming into because they're coming into MI 24, right? All right. So once you understand how to use the echo liners, then you understand how to use the Charlie, then you understand how to do the taxi highways, the runways, then you understand how to basically come into the Botronic locations, how they come into track locations. Planet signals comes in modifications, right? Central lines of waves and set lines in a 4-track location, right? Directing signals. Modificate lines, right over left in travel. Points lines of graph, center communications, right? Out signal lines, 2-track locations. 3 set correlations, 4-track locations, right? That's one signal into 4 lines of panels and line rotation surface and planet communication setting the surface. Okay? This is all through your right ear. Okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how to use the spectrum in the eardrum that's given to you in line settings. It's going to communicate lines of grounds, sending calculation lines and foundation lines of signals, puts all communication setting to sonar and track locations. Direct lines, signal lines, communication setting to an XE1000 and travel. Boom. All right. That's a set lines in one line. Right over line and line rotation settings, and location lower line ground center locations, ozone. Direct calculus lines of quantification awareness in line specification, run, initiate, execute line screen adaptations of Pluto, coordinates lines of north, east lines of west, 1 corner lines of 1, 3, and 6 lines of 7. Okay, all through Pluto. Okay, signify. Directing signal lines of track communication to its system, opens all calculated modified track lines. Directing signal lines of sonar, echo lunar line 1, echo lunar line 2, echo lunar line rotation of Zulu line, the Fox line rotation surface and traction. It gets a lot more complicated because your position location is coming in nanoseconds. You're coming into Neuralinks. You're coming out of the data, you're coming out of the OMIs, you're coming into higher lines of communications to inner Tron line setting, to an outer line spectrum. Okay, so it's the lines of Tron mechanisms. It's line calculus and setting to travels, teleportation, telecommunication, telegraphing, teleweaving, in that line rotation surface and track location. So we get a 17 line of measure, 6 lines of volume. Okay, that's going to go in your ear. Okay, that symbolizes the lines of Jupiter. Here's Jupiter and track location, right? And then you got Saturn and 3 lines of communications. Okay, and then you got Mercury and center communication, right? Signifies a 1 over 7 over traction, 7 over 3, 6 over 1, 6 over 2, 6 over 5, and 1 over 6. Okay? Now it gets complicated because it's all in chronological order. Now the sound waving line pattern puts everything in line communication setting to a tractor beam. Process calculation lines of foundation grounds, setting communication lines of the sun and the moon in the same rotation surface and track location setting of directions and set calculation. Complicated stuff all through your ears. Okay, so I want you guys to understand these things because your ears are going to come in through formation line ground lines to your planet surface. That's going to give you schematics now, not just sound barriers. Right, you're coming in schematics through your ears. All right, sound waving patterns. Let's direct signals into sonar lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of spectrum. Okay, echo line, 1 rotation line, service in a 4 line rotation surface and track location. Okay, platforms this way, cross line signals. Platform this way, cross line signals. Okay, process ground centers, open signal, open panel, open communication, ground center, line rotation, surface and traction. All through your ears. Right. All right. So getting schematics is extremely important to the intron, to the outtron. Okay, it gets all in communication setting in all lines of communication. Illumination, neographs, communication, ultragraphs, calculation setting, eye location setting, translucent patterns, correlating position locations, echo zulu lines of X-ray. Directing signal lines of 16 lines of setting over 6 over pi. 16 lines of volume, 6 lines of measure, equals lines of 1 box into frame of triangulation, into line communications into data file, process lines of 3 lines, percentage over line, run system. This is what comes through here, but it's all through schematics. Initiate, track locations, all calculations in the intro, directing lines in position of Pluto and track location. Okay, that's all coming from your ear. Getting communication lines of 1 cycle, 6 lines of center, 3 lines of tractions, 4 lines of measure, and set position, 7 over traction. Directing lines of modification, lines of triangulation, lines of flux, set points, lines of docking, 3 lines of setting, and travel. Okay, and again, this is all coming from your ear through sonar and echo. So it sets up the schematics, sets up the primer. Center core system, there's the primer. Boom, right in the center. Process calculation lines is changing the box frames and line position location of travel. Points lines of center, data formation line, ground set location through a system in calculation. Okay? It's all through schematics. Process ground line centers, data file lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, and track location. Directing lines of ground center XC1000 comes in information line setting. Process communication indicates 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12 line communication of sonars and line rotation surface can track location. All through your ears. Okay. See, the thing is, the higher you go, the more you see spectrum. The more you see lights, the more you see travel, the more you see schematics, the more you see the primer. So once you understand that, then you understand how it comes in all levels of modification. Okay? Because you have to really understand what your ears are used for in space and online. All right, travel line screen adaptation lines of surface. Let's go to the alphabetical line screen adaptation system. Let's get into Mercury. All right, Mercury lines, planet line screen adaptation lines of surface location setting, set lines of 3 track location lines and high center interference. 42 screen lines adaptation and processing in line communication lines at your right ear and track location. That's Mercury, sending you intel through your ear. Right lines, comes out lines, a left line in communications. Goes around constantly, and position expands until you understand the direct signals of modification. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? All right, so to simplify this, guys, is to truly understand what sonar is, understanding the echo. It's like, hey, how are you? I'm fine. So it keeps going, right? You set up sonar lines to direct signals through alpha line channel waves. 1, 2, 3. 3 waves, right? So everything in position, the planet picks it up. Everything picks it up. Planets pick it up, right? They pick it up. So they set sonar back to you, and track location. Very simple, right? So they hear everything you say. It's in a recording device. Setting lines of seconds over minutes over pi puts a 4-track division lines and inhibitors. Now your inhibitors, line screen adaptations, the neck line screen, direct signals, right? Process lines of correlations, setting lines, communication, setting, and travel. Okay? Sets communication to high center interference and travel communication to its system through calculation. Okay? So you have inhibitors back here in travel. You have inhibitors back here in travel and communications, right? Directing lines of setting, lines of 0, line conditions left and right over track location and lines of provision. Calculus modify line set location, lines of sonar, lines of 1, and position lines of sonar, lines of 2, and track location. All right. So the central line communication to its system has to really understand and use the product of system lines of travel and set calculation to a setting. Okay? Complicated, right? But it's a lot of fun. So everything is coming to you through schematics through the years now because you're reaching MI lines of setting. Mind's eye tracks its communication lines at Earth line, rotates the cycles in seconds, minutes, and hours. Now, online communication system, all calculate modified, ether or firmament, 3 set lines, right? Setting lines, communication setting, cross line signals, 1, 2, and 3 track location, right? Calculate lines directing signals through pi and track location. Sets lines of 3, sets lines of 6, set lines of 8 and 15 minutes in track location. Okay? So 15 minutes on seconds and 1 ear line rotations, you get travels and direct signals into modification. Complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. And again, this is through your right ear. Left ear tracks the location lines to the opposite system location of space. Space modulates the screen lines and adaptation lines of surface and track location. Hoo-ah! Woo! Right over left and left over right. Okay? So you have to understand your actual ears are sonar bridging. They're portals. Okay? They're wormholes. Okay, to connect one to another. All right? This is what it is in position. Sonar lines of 1, sonar lines of 2. Right? Tunnel lines of 3. Those are your ears. But what are your ears doing through the spectrum of set calculations? Okay? Directing lines of panels in a 3-line cycle, line surface and track location of center operation. Right? Communicates lines of planets, centers, inhibit adaptation zone lines, screen lines of transitions over screen. Planet line sequence, planet rotation, planet communication lines, and screen adaptation. Okay? So once you understand how to use the solar brackets, because you have to understand the shape of your ear. There's a reason why the ear is shaped like that. Okay? There's a reason why it's like this. Okay, there's a reason why it's lines of communications in set position. Okay, there's a reason why the ear is this. Okay, it's like a tree. When you basically cut the tree and you can see the onions raveling, right? That's position of its sonar. And that sonar tethers its position in set position of seconds, minutes, and hours. So it directs and redirects extremely fast in position and knows exactly where it's going through its sonar's track location. Okay, once it hits the planet, okay, it gets confirmation. So the planet's sending you signals in a 3-track locations into the eardrum. Eardrum picks up the signals in modification lines of tether and line rotation surface and track location. Okay, so it's really interesting how the ear forms a system all through space anomaly. Now, if you look really close, you can actually see your ear is the number 3. Gotcha. Your ear is number 3. Everybody's ear is number 3. That's how I design you. 3 central line is the ground line surface. The process communication lines is the plasma screen. Directing signals and modification puts everything in modification setting at 3 signals. 3 signals: past, present, and future. So your actual ear is the number 3. All right, so in that core center line condition setting, ground centers, 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 surface, 1 traction. Okay, sonar lines of 1, sonar lines of 3, sonar lines of 6 in travel. Calculate line screen adaptations of process, calculation lines of 3 settings. Okay, sets communication lines of planet 1, planet 2, planet 6. Okay, sonar comes back into 1, 2, and 3 lines of measure, which is the solar sail. Division lines of setting sets up line communication setting and all communication to system, part of acceleration and back in set location. Hoo-ah! All through the ear lines rotation. Through number 3. Number 3 is the ground centers, right? You got the communication lines in the crop circles. 0 gravity communication lines. 1 is the indication of the grounds. 2 is the security. And 3 is your Fibonacci. So that's where your eardrum is. It's the number 3, right? So the 6 and 9 platform. When I created you guys a line screen adaptation to a system, you have to understand how it processes you and all lines of communication setting communicate to its setting. Getting communication lines of grounds, understand the provision lines of cycles, retract correlation setting and communicate to its system all through ground communication. Once you understand how to modify that in line screen adaptation, it processes it much easier through sonar and echo. Okay, but that's exactly what it is. If you look really close, you can actually see the 3 and sign line. You actually can see the face recognition. You can actually see the intelligence information of its ear. There's actually intelligence of face recognition setting now. You can actually see the intelligence, right? So you guys have to understand these things because that's how it all works through your right and through your left ears. Okay, I showed you in so many modification lines of primers and circuits, how it correlates and calculates and modifies, and how it lines its communication system, how it lines its travel, and how it communicates to its setting. Okay, through your traffic, your inventories, and your flow. Getting into that position locations, start to actually look at your body, what it is through its design. Okay? Getting into that position locations comes into all lines. Coming into the contract, the blueprints, get you in high position locations, how you are connected to all information setting of space and time. The synchronous correlates and setting. The synchronicities lines communicate to its system. The planet to division locates to its setting. The operation cycles and line communication setting through the echo, through the sonar of set design. Why your ears ring. Okay, why do they constantly keep ringing, right? So it's a repeating pattern in position of audio line screen adaptation that processes your position locations, how to use the central systems and number 3 in set position, right? 3 central lines, past, present, future. Okay, everything is past, present, future. It has to be because it's all timelines at once. You need past, you need present, you need future. That's connecting lines of the 3 forks in set position. See, 3 forks. Direct lines of 4 over 5, 6 lines of 7 over lines of 12, 24, 48, 72, and 144 platform. Puts all communication and ground centers and line communication to its system all through travel. Okay, if we get a core track division lines of 21, equals lines of 7 and line rotation interference, Sets communication lines of 1, 2, and 3 lines of patterns. Direct calculation lines of 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 travel, 1 communications. Direct calculation lines and all lines of inhibitors over screen adaptation of intelligence. Okay? So having fun with that is really understand how to use the echo and sonars that are given to you through ring and ears. Getting communication lines highest interference. It's like understanding the Fibonacci goes this way in set position. But understand the Fibonacci goes this way in set position. So what is it creating direct and redirect? It's creating a tunnel. It's creating a portal. It's creating a stargate. It's creating a wormhole through your ear. Right? Setting calculation lines of plasma line setting has a seconds over lines over perimeter over pi. The square root and triangulation line screen adaptation to its surface sets calculate, modify, interact location. Now I know it's very confusing what the team is coming into now. Okay, ears of all calculate and modify. So getting any communication to a setting through travel. Okay, so you guys are going to receive line screen adaptations when we get into and out of track applications hardware. Next Friday is your test and screen lines adaptations and processing how to use your software. That's going to put you to all lines of communication at 24 setting. And once you get into 24 setting, your primary circuits, your core center line communication setting is going to change the communication to its system. The communication line screen adaptations, you'll process more lines of calculation how to use your plans through the surface. That's all lines of all communication to its setting. Okay, complicated stuff, right? But it's a lot of fun. Now you really understand what your ears are and what they're used for through echo and sonar. Okay? It's like, okay, I'm trying to understand this in all lines of travel. Okay? But what you have to understand is that your ears are just a sonar. They're echo lines. They're creating portals. They have platforms of communication. This is the lines of communication setting. So from this position to that position, or this position to that position, that's the Rosen bridge. Okay? That's the bridge. That's the bridge from one center to the other center, right? Which is its tube. Setting lines of communication lines on one cycle, on one center, one surface, and one track location. That's all it is. Creating lines of 6 and 9, line screen, 6 and 9, line screen, adaptation. Process correlates the lines, sonar lines, echo lines, screen adaptation lines of surface. Calculate, modify, and line screen adaptation to its system. Process calculation lines over and over and over and over and over and over in set position. Right? Gets calculation modification lines, planet gets inline screen adaptation to its system, communicates over again in the same signal and different lines of pattern and different lines of information to its cycle. Okay, that's what goes on in seconds, minutes, and hours. Okay, so you're constantly getting intel. Okay, there's no difference in line screen adaptations and processing getting intel from this position and 3 track locations and setting calculations. In your line screen at the high centers. Process communicates to your settings. All through line screen adaptations in line screen. All communicate to a system in all lines of travel and set calculation. Okay? So 3 central lines of planets and 3 signals. Okay? So this is the connection lines of pi. Okay? Constellation, Orion's belt. 3 lines of track location lines of provision. The real Orion's belt is the constellations of pathogens and line rotation surface and track location. Crossing line signals, line conditions, highest interference, and a 4-line provision. Communicate line ground centers, line screen adaptation to its system all through traveling track location. Directly high center line conditions setting to next 1,000 platforms that communicate setting our lower screen and lower spectrum and track location. Hoo-ah. Okay, very powerful stuff through echo and through sonar. All right. Getting into that lines of surface really lines the communication lines of travel. Now coming into your primary circuits, you understand your primates. Getting line communication setting because you understand your cerebrals. Now we're going to go into your hardwares. Understanding the calculation setting to the home beacon lights of you, how to use your satellites, your modems, your Wi-Fi's, your communication lines of your towers, your grounds, your powers, and your atmospheres, and your highways, guys. Getting into that specific locations, you start to understand how to use the innertron and the outertron of you in set position. The center core system has a galaxy line switch. Now that switch lines anomaly sets lines communication setting to measure. The scale to the electrical line grids sets all communication setting of its program. If we get a 21 line of flush equals lines of 8 in track locations, right? We get a planet surface lines of Jupiter in track locations, right? information lines of 2, information lines of 1, information lines of equal lines locations of 8. Process calculation lines, again, going in position location of travels into 1, 2, 3, and 4 set correlation setting of travel. Comes outline screen, sets a tubing system into the left ear and track locations. Directed signals into modification set lines, high signal location system, and all line communication magnetic high formation line screen adaptation of force directions of space and time. Hoo-ah. Okay, and again, through echo and through sonar. Okay, so understanding what goes on with your system inside calculation. Okay. Higher level setting, isn't it? It's getting very complicated now because you're working with your ears. So every time you get in line screen, what you guys get in position locations in your software lines, you automatically come into your provision lines, your echo and sonar through schematics, through instructions, through applications, through centers, through operation, through space and time. Okay? So it's a lot more fun when you get a little bit more understanding. It's like, oh my gosh, my ears are ringing. So my ears are ringing, but now, oh, I'm seeing schematics coming in. Okay, and then you stand there, oh my gosh, I got 25,000 line files. This is great. So I can use that in platforms of 3 set lines into 4 line provisions of cycles and traction. Okay, directing lines of files indicates lines of 1 center, 0 lines rotation has coordinates. Coordinates are always on the bottom in your flight manifest. That's how you come into your sys location, your settings through your echo, your chambers, your track location, and the lines of your Charlie, or anything through your Foxtrot and communication lines of travel. So there's always data files and line communication setting, but there's process lines of indications in travel communication. Okay? Getting into that communication lines, the ground center line condition setting, you're starting to understand how to use your navigation, your flight manifest, the position location of center. Let's go with the communication. All right, so we got coordinate center lines connections to the right and calculation lines to the left. All right? So process lines of 3 triangulations and split lines of 4 settings. Okay, looking at travels, right? Data lines of 1. Outgoing of platform flight mass lines, correlation lines of 2, and outline cast lines, screen lines of 3, track location of data. Data process lines back and center, back and tractions of 2 panels. Process lines in 1 cycle, 1 center, magnetic highway, lines of screen lines, adaptation of processing lines of data files and track locations. Directing symbolism lines in ground centers, in process calculation lines of earth and rotation surface and traction. Going through your ears, going through your sonars, all through your flight manifest, through your data formation platforms. All right. So we'll go through this again. We'll go through point graphs. And point graphs is docking settings. Point lines of 1, point lines of 2, point lines of 3. Over cross line conditions, cross line settings. Process calculation over cross line communication. All right. All right. So in lines, set lines, flight navigation lines, data processing 1. Okay, indicate lines, coordinates, lines of screen, Jupiter line. Okay, data formation lines, Jupiter cross line signal location lines of Pluto, and data formation lines of screen lines, coordinates lines, and line condition northeast lines of west. Sets communication ground centers over cross lines of Jupiter and line screen adaptation lines of surface. So we go in position lines of platitude and screen lines and optical screen lines and optimum line rotation surface and travel. Okay, very complicated stuff, but a lot of fun. And again, this all goes through the transitions of your ears of sonar and echo. Okay. So the more you get into the ground lines, the more you send the communication lines into formation lines of data screens. Data formation lines and pixelation graphs, holographic settings, levels, communication lines and scales, balance communicate through the system, right? But understanding your cell modification screens and line communications. All the communication lines of sonar that comes to you and track location. Okay, cross line signals and line conditions of 3 travels. Okay, platitude lines of 1, platitude lines of 4, platitude lines of 6, platitude lines of 8, platitude lines of 12. The 3 lines of communications. Cross line signals, flux capacitor over cross location of screen setting. Okay, getting into line settings, you have to understand how to use the platforms of communication lines of grounds. Okay, ground lines of 1, ground lines of 4. Process line signals in ground lines of setting, okay, where you can go up and down and cross line connections through your weapon system in all lines of travel in communication of cell modification. Okay, standing on the ground center locations. And again, this goes through your ears and this goes through your line connections, your sonars. and your echoes. If we understand the echo and the sonar, then we can understand the platitude of what's going on through schematics, because everything is given to you through schematics. What do you think your upgrades are? Schematics, drawings, structures, designs, all from the inner core of your system, which is the outer core lines, the inner tron, the outer tron, right? Interspection, the outer spectrum, inner space, the outer space, right? You guys already been through this line communications, but now you're starting to identify planets in rotation to sonar, echo, and set position. Okay, come to you and provisionalize those cycles. Okay, XC1000s comes out, and line screen adaptations, processing line screens, adaptation lines of surface. Okay, all three line screen adaptations in position location, your right and your left ear and track location. All right, process lines of 1 in position, process lines of 2 in position, process lines of 3 in position, process lines of 4 in position of your right ear. All through XC1000s. Okay, so they go in and they go out. You don't see them, but they know what they're doing. So they modify their system and then they change the configuration of their face. They stamp proceed their settings so they stay always in your system in track location. So getting into that position location is understanding location lines and screen lines adaptation of your platforms. How to walk your system, how to fly in through your system, and how to go through levitation in your settings. All through ears. Okay, one goes in, one goes out. Okay, so it's like entering and exit. Okay, you exit, enter here. Okay, you're here, you're entering, right? And there's the platform. Okay, and here's another door. So you're out. Okay, you're here, now you're out, and then you go with another door, right? But are you going through the right ear or are you going through the left ear? Right over left, left to right, because remember, your modulation screens, your simulation screen line adaptations of your body and information lines and ground center location, your GADs, is mutating. It's mutating. It's changing information in your realities in real time. So you have to understand how to use that information location to a location grid and setting, process calculation ground centers of portals, line communication to the system, and opposite direct signals and calculation. Okay? And again, it's through your ears. Okay? Everything is processed through your ears, through set position. Okay? So now you understand how this all works in configuration setting. Okay? Because you're reaching higher levels now through the mind's eye. But you have to understand the platforms of travel now through your flight you manifest. Everybody has that. But it's understand how to use that through navigation, your pre-flights. That's why you have school. School gives you guidance. School gives you adaptability. School gives you force recognition. School gives you the condition of what's going on through you in space and time, how to really understand the mind's eye through travel. Okay, with humanity, they just have to get connected lines, eyes, interference, how to use their echo and their sonars to their chambers of their taxi and their highways and set position of the runways. Understand all communication system. Very simple to understand these things in attractions, right? What does the plane do in line position locations? It takes off, right? That's all it does. The plane's here. It takes off, right? And when it takes off, it levels off, okay? So it's leveling here, and it's leveling here in travel, okay? That's all it is, nothing else, right? But in position for the connections of the airplane, I'm going to blow you guys away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 settings, right? For an airplane to actually stay in the air, there has to be a magnetic force in position of its tail to its nose, a propeller, to keep in the air, right? So it's connected right away to the roots of its grounds of its earth. Connects lines of tether and a 144 line screen adaptation. That's what keeps the flying mechanism of an airplane at 800, 1,000 knots in travel. Hoo-ah. So in that lines, yes, I know Captain wants to see this. So you have to understand the tether when it comes in all lines of formation grounds. Again, in that communication, how to use the earth, the air, the water, and the fire. It all lines the same location setting, but what it is, it's all digitalized. It's a magnetic force lines of communication that keeps the airplane in the air and travel. It goes from 800 to 1,000 knots. So we go fast lines of track applications. So when you're in position of the actual airplane sitting down, you see it in slow motion. You don't actually see it going fast, right? But if you want to see it going fast, don't look outside. Look at the clouds. And then you see yourself going fast. Never look at direct view. Always look beyond, right? So it's really interesting when you're looking at through a window frame, but it's all digitalized and all computerized. And it has a center core of a plasma line setting. Now, there's the process lines of a data formation screen, directing signal lines of communication system. This is what an airplane does in processing. It has a process communication setting to travel. One set position, travel and position location of 3 lines of communications, right? The airplane is locked in signal, okay, in platform, okay? So once it goes on a 45 line screen adaptation, it has to balance out and travel and communications, right? That's why you have a level in lines of a box frame in position locations from here, and track location, all right? So it knows exactly where it needs to land and travel and communication to its runway and set position. Land safely, line screen adaptations of balance, okay? So I'm trying to get you to understand how this works through an airplane through simulation, all through computerizations. Getting compute screen is a direct signals how to understand how to use that information locations because it's all ground lines of setting, all through travel and position. That's all it is, nothing else. Okay. If you look at it, you actually can see it, right, and understand what it is through platforms of 1, 2, 3, and 4 settings. Position lines of 4, 3, and 2, and 1 settings in travel. So that's position, location, and travel communications, right? Okay, you set lines. There's the tail and track location. There's the plane, right? So the mechanism is on a line wire, which is a matrix strip, which is its data formation screen line and set position. It's its highway, right? But it has a magnetic force to the earth, but it's tethered through 144 track lines and settings that keeps it in levitation ground lines. It only stays in an 8-track division. It can't go any higher in space lines anomaly because it's a freezing mechanism location setting that sets that correlation setting to a switch that puts all calculation setting and travel in communications. So that's how an airplane flies, off the magnetic force through its earth. It's a magnetic pole that keeps it lines that create screen lines adaptations. If we process the earth, we already know that it's a magnetic board. We already know it's a motherboard. So when you're looking lines of screen lines adaptation, this is what you're seeing. This is the motherboard. Okay? And it's pretty wild when you actually come down and see it in track location, right? So all it is just it's all position locations to Minecraft. You're seeing lines of divots, okay, structure lines, building lines, screen lines, adaptations. No difference when you see a cloud, right? But you're seeing the motherboard, the circuitry board, the circulating line screen adaptation to its settings. That's all you're seeing in travel. That's it, nothing else. Okay, it's just a metric board, but it has matrix strips and line screen adaptation. Process communication lines of screen line adaptations, right? Cross lines of symbols. It has a platform lines of center and set position, okay? But it also has a ground centers to its earth and set calculations. And a process lines to its highways. Everything has a ground powers, outputs, and highways, guys. And position a magnetic highway information lines of cycles and track location, right? So the above signal keeps the airplane in track location lines of setting in a 5-line signal, okay? Set position location. Here's the airplane and track location of center. Okay. Flying mechanism line screen adaptation. There you go. Okay. So all this keeps the plane in the atmosphere, right? Magnetic force of the grounds, the powers in the atmospheres and the highways. All right. All right. So now we get a little bit more understanding how this all works through an airplane. Getting that communication setting, understand how to use that in all track locations, your data formation screen lines, how to formulate the screen line communication in your flights or your manifest. Getting lines of communication setting and ground lines of communication of plasma screen centers. Communicate the grounds, the powers, the atmospheres, and the highways, puts a track provision lines of cycles. If we get a 45-line clocking, calculate and modify in line screen lines of 15 lines of measure and track locations. Directing lines of 14 lines of cycles, sets communication lines of 9 and weighting system. Okay, process calculation lines of grounds, position lines of power over line screen, adaptation lines of surface track location. Off calculation lines, bring it back in center of communication, right? So it directs lines of 5, 4, and 1, and 5, and 1, and 4 in track location of balance. Directing signal lines and set position all levels, sets lines of 2 lines of communication lines XT thousandths. Platitude screen lines adaptations of process lines of 1, 6 over 8 over 6 over pi in track location. Direct calculation lines at ground centers operate the system in line communication to X2000 in line rotation surface interaction. Okay, complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, right? So everything is tethered to 144. Everything has to be tethered to 144 because it's a foundation of the grounds, the powers, the atmosphere, and the highways. So that's what it is. It's like puppets on a string. It's all controlled through a magnetic force that connects to its system. There's a galaxy shift line, screen line. It's a magnetic highway in set position. Okay, and then you got your atmospheres. And then you got your powers. And then you got your grounds of your Earth. Okay, so, and then you have your laser track lines, which are the 45 split lines of communications. And then you got your cross signals in lines through your limitation. There's your simulation. That's all it is. Nothing else. Your simulation is a hologram. But understand how to use it through the hologram is all through pixelation graphs through a hologram setting. You have to understand the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres, and the highways and track locations, right? So this is interesting stuff in set position. The plane is always in its atmospheres of set position. It's never on the ground. It's always in space. We're always in space. We're the center operation of space. Okay? So if we understand the track, we visualize the cycles, then we understand what up is, and then we understand what down is in track location. Okay? Center communication lines, high center interference. This is the above signal. In set position. You're seeing your Earth this way. Looking down is up. Looking up is the position locations of down. So it's pretty crazy how you see it, right? Pretty wild, right? So it's tether and line screens and the 5 adaptation lines of surface and line screen adaptation, right? This process is the communication of magnetic that keeps the plane in the air and travel in line communication to the system all through calculation. Okay? So it's a tether line screen adaptation to its Earth. 45 line screen adaptation lines of signals in set position. It's all magnetic of force recognition. Right? All right. So I think we get a little bit more understanding here. There's a lot going on through echo sonar and chambers of communication setting to your delta. Delta is information lines of heading. You know exactly what direction you're going and why you're going there in line position. But this is what goes on in line position location in your ears and right and left and track locations. Okay? We're going to stop there because there's a lot going on through traction. Okay? So you're all coming into schematics now. Next Friday in traction. All right? See you in 5.